see that. I was very interested in seeing the progression of a game from younger players like a Sanchez or Rodman. I think maybe there's a little bit of a false narrative out there around these players when it comes to the national team in terms of players who are mainly utilized off the bench. So they need to come in and make that spark immediately. What could they look like? Or maybe they are unable to build over the course of longer minutes. And that is not the case at all. I think they showed that again in a game like this. I think they got things started pretty early.
Yeah, I agree completely, especially when we're almost comparing it to the first match. I mean, we are comparing it to the first match because it's 2023. It's our first two matches. It's against the same competition. And the biggest message and the biggest takeaway from the United States first game against New Zealand was it was a slow, disjointed start. It was a really slow start. So that was something that I think everyone was paying attention to in this second match, and the fact that there were some younger players in the starting lineup and players that are looking to prove themselves. The first thing I noticed in the opening 5 minutes was that it was not a slow start. They turned that around immediately, and that was something I was really impressed and happy to see in watching this, because in the opening 5 minutes, Mallory Swanson, she gets in behind, she gets opportunities on goal, she gets in front of goal, looking at chances, balls across the back line. We could see pretty much in the first 10 minutes what the game plan was for the United States. Can they get the ball wide, utilize the width of the field much more than they did in the first game against Football Ferns, get the ball wide down and early crosses in, because as you have runners like Swanson, Rodman, Hatch running at the New Zealand back line, and New Zealand is also running towards their own goal, that's when you want those curling crosses in behind the back line. And that's what we saw in the opening 5 minutes, one or two of them already happening before we actually see players getting on the end of it. It was like ironing out some of those kinks in the first 10 minutes in terms of like just getting on the end of it and making contact with it. But the chances were there, right? Like to open this game. And that's what I was really, really pleased to see, the quick start and the quick turnaround for this team. I think it's also important to note, we talked about the starting lineups. Alex Morgan initially dubbed with being the captain for this game, but because of her late game scratch, it ends up going to Rose Lavelle. And for Rose Lavelle to be the captain of this game, it was so telling. She dominated this game. She controlled it. She was the captain of not just the United States, but of the entire field. Every player on the field, she controlled everything that happened.
It was like when we were talking about the first game, we were like, oh, this is, your two different 45, Taylor two halves kind of scenario, preseason-y kind of vibes, kicking the rust off energy. But this game just felt a little bit more complete, and you didn't have as much disjointedness in the first after in the second game that we did the first. But let's keep that energy going with Lavelle here, because this middle third of the pitch is what was really intriguing to me as we continued to watch this game over the course of the 90 minutes. Watching Lavelle, yes, Captain Arnsbag, that was cool to see her get it, but watching her sort of like you said, sort of run the show here, and seeing her drop lower while allowing Sanchez to just sort of, giving a player like Sanchez that kind of freedom to play higher and kind of be that initial playmaker at times. I just sort of felt like it almost didn't take anything away from what Roosevelt can actually do. And I was just like, God, like she's such a good player that even if she's dropping lower, it's almost like it felt like they're not losing anything in the attack or the creativity from her.
Rose has still a massive impact on the game, even if she's not being that fourth forward, running forward. And she did allow Ashley Sanchez to do that, which that's what she does for club. That's what her traditional role is, Sanchez, with this United States national team. So Rose was the one, as the veteran, as the captain, that Vlatko tasked with, hey, drop a little bit deeper, play that 8, not so much of a 10 in the midfield. And Lavelle's effectiveness in being able to be that role was tremendous. She played it better than we've seen Lindsay Horan play it most recently. And I think that's something that's interesting and probably poses a lot of questions to Vlatko Andonovski at this point, because without Lindsay Horan, there had to be a little bit of movement. And that was Rose, who stepped up to the plate. And she ends up getting a brace in this game. She also gets an assist in this game. She ran the show completely, was the entire playmaker, and was contributing on the stat sheet.
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised to see the goals come in, or at least a couple of goals come in the first half. I think that was going to be probably the biggest, one of the biggest changes from that game 1 to game 2. That yes, essentially you're looking at these score lines and you see 2 blowouts, right? But they both happened in 2 very different ways, and the games in which the score lines in the games in which they happened were 2 very completely different games. So to see this a ballooned kind of scoreline in this one, it was a 5-0. I was like, and in my prediction, I mentioned that on .com, I was like, I think they'll actually get one more. I think not only are they going to get goals in this first half, I think they're actually going to get 5 of them. And we saw that. That's exactly what we saw in this game. I mean, we saw a beautiful goal in the 22nd minute and another really great goal to sort of close out this first half in the 39th minute. So we have this lovely sort of Washington spirit crafted goal, sort of spearheaded by a veteran like Dunn. You sort of see her winning these balls along the left side. It was, you love to see it. Great to have Crystal Dunn back, but you saw this great quick ball moving. You saw Hatch feed Rodman taking this ball nearly end line. But just sort of the quick reaction from a player like this. I just love that Rodman she has this sort of aura of kind of the winger that isn't afraid of the pass. Right. It's a layer of selflessness that I don't think you see too often from a lot of young players. Sometimes you get a lot of young players who are trying to get the stat, right? Or trying to make sure that they're on the end of the goal. But this is a player who's only in her who's only going to be in her 3rd season with the Spirit at a club level, and really only her 2nd year with the national team. And we're just seeing a layer of selflessness from this player that I really, really appreciate. So you see this sort of quick reaction to open up the goal, and Hatch nets it away. I thought it was a phenomenal goal to sort of open up the goal scoring in this one.
I think you said it best with Trinity Rodman. It's a level of selflessness that we don't typically see in such a young player. I mean, this was her 3rd U.S. start with this international roster, and she ends up getting her 3rd assist in 2 games to open this. And it's the opening goal that Rodman gets the assist. And it's the way that it unfolds is very typical of Trinity Rodman. It's her bread and butter. It's what she wants. She wants the ball wide in the wings areas with defenders closing in around her. And she's got incredible vision to understand where her runners are, where the ball needs to be placed. So she curls it in perfectly into Hatch. I think Swanson is on the back post sliding for it, looking to get it as well. And it ends up going to Hatch, who gets there first. And to me, that it made me smile, because not only was the buildup of the play incredible, and that's what we want to see and have a lot of consistency with, but there were 2 runners on the back post ready for the ball. So if Hatch missed it, Swanson would have been there. And if Swanson missed it, Hatch would have been there. That was crucial to see. Now, can they stagger their runs a little bit? That way they're not the exact same, but there
were almost a couple of moments where you thought they were going to run into each other. I mean, that first goal, they were almost
same exact run, but also they're both going for the ball, right? They both are looking for it. And then to see kind of the continuation of this first half, and the U.S. to keep their foot on their pedal, as you mentioned, just before the 40-minute mark, Rose Lavelle ends up getting her goal, her 23rd career goal, off of a great ball from Sofia Huerta. It was so beautifully placed from Huerta, floating in over the top behind the back line. And that's Hatch here at this moment, makes that near post penalty spot run and ends up drawing 2 of the New Zealand defenders, which leaves Rose Lavelle wide open on the late run on the back side for Lavelle. And she volleys it one time into the net. It was fantastic to see. And I think in the buildup of these 2 goals, I know you mentioned Crystal Dunn, who was fantastic in this game, but also I think Andy Sullivan, we saw a different side of her. She was a little bit higher up the pitch as well. She was a little bit more engaged offensively into the attack for this team, having maybe the confidence to understand that Rose Lavelle was going to cover for her, playing a little bit deeper, and Rose being as quick as she is and as talented as she is, allowed Andy a little bit more freedom to push up and be that player, to be attacking in the defensive third, and to have 6 and 7 attackers versus just 5 or 4 moving forward. And that's what we saw, because that's how these first 2 goals unfolded. And before you know it, it's 2-0 and we're heading into halftime for the US. And it was a good first half.
It was one of those first halves where it's just like, okay, they looked better from that first game. And not only did they look better, they put together a couple of really great goals to give them the early lead coming into the locker room. And it just sort of felt like when they were going to come into the second half that you knew there were going to be more goals. Like that was the kind of energy that you were left with after watching that first 45. And I loved that for this team, a little bit different from that first half during the first game, because with the first game we saw like a 4-player substitution to start off the second half in that first game. And with this second game, that wasn't necessarily the case. If anything, there were 2 substitutions, yes, but these substitutions also felt like your typical kind of like game planned type of substitutions. We had Emily Fox coming in for Crystal Dunn, and you had Emily Sonnet coming in for Naomi Girma.
Better back.
Lisa, I said, are we going to see Emily Sonnet in this game? And B, if we do, we're going to see her at center back. I don't know if they can keep her, as someone who's like one of those outside back positions. I think you've got 2 players who have made the case to keep getting minutes at those positions, and someone like a Sophia Huerta and an Emily Fox. And now with Crystal Dunn back, I'm not too sure if that's where you're utilizing someone like an Emily Sonnet, but we see her come in for Naomi Girma, who exited this January camp with two 45-minute shifts within the 2 games.
And two starts.
So I got to ask you, like, what did you think of this sub coming in, and where did it catch you off a little bit?
So the Dunn substitute, only 45 for Crystal Dunn, not at all surprising. We talked about her being on minute management and building her back in, and good to see Emily Fox get a shift again, right? I think that's kind of the eyes that Vlatko Adanovsky is looking at between that left back. And it's just, if Crystal Dunn can get back up to fitness ability and things like that. When I saw Emily Sonnet coming in for Naomi Girma, I was shocked. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. The fact that Sonnet playing in that center back, it makes sense because she's not going to play in the outside back in this type of situation. But I also don't think there's that much room for her in the center back position. I think that this was maybe a test for Sonnet, because this is the first time we saw Sonnet as she did come back from injury. So getting minutes in this game, this was her 70th career cap and her first since July 14th during the CONCACAF W Championship. So this is a player that's also looking to work themselves back in. And I would not play Emily Sonnet over Naomi Girma moving forward, right? This is a friendly. This is where you're looking to get minutes, but Girma outplays Sonnet every single time. So that's it's not a question about.
I think Girma outplays any of the center backs at this moment.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it was just a little interesting. I think that Girma, maybe I would have liked to see Girma and Sonnet over Girma, or over Sonnet and Cook, which is what we did see. But I think that Sonnet and Cook allowed for both of them to kind of have their strengths and their weaknesses between Sonnet and Cook, because Girma, like we said, just will outshine anyone. So then it provides a balance between Cook and Sonnet in there. But yeah, that was something that was a little bit interesting for me to see. But as the second half got rolling, there was opportunities and opportunities and opportunities. Swanson playing really good balls in, Rodman also crossing really good balls in, Hatch getting on the end of a lot of them, trying to redirect. Hatch so close at the start of the second half, which almost getting one.